Okay, Beseder, I think we're gonna start. We're gonna do the sixth parak, right? We started it last week. I want to start again from the beginning. And I think we're only gonna do the sixth parak this week. Just because it's been a little, not to make excuses, but been a little extra hectic. I've got a rally coming up for one of my cases. And we've been doing a lot of planning. And as is always the case towards the end of the workday, there were a couple new developments that need addressing. So I didn't have as much time to start the seventh chapter as I would have hoped. So we'll do chapter six. We'll get as far as we get. We'll end whenever we end, and then next week we'll pick it back up with the next chapter, Mirza Shem. 12 chapters. We're just about halfway through. And the later chapters, there's a bit of repetition, and some of them are shorter. So we're looking at, we'll figure out what comes next, but we're probably looking at between another month to month and a half of Kohelet. So that's it's good. It's a big deal. So, but okay, let's get to it. Let's jump in. We're in chapter 6. V'yesh Ra, right, again, in the previous chapter, we had seen a couple of things that Shlomo described as great evils or great misfortunes, big bad things that happen to people in life. And this is, I believe, a third example, right? We had seen before that there's a person who works towards gathering as much as they can, but they can't take it with them. A lover of money will never be satisfied with money. A lover of abundance will not be satiated with wheat. This too is futility. But now we're going to see a third example that I think again is a little bit less on the individual doing it, painting them as less responsible. But we'll see. Yesh ra asher ra'isi tachas hashamesh. Right, there is an evil that I've seen under the sun. V'rabohi al ha'adam, and it's abundant upon people, right? It's prominent in life. Ish asher yitain loho Elohim osher unechasim, right? A person to whom God gave riches and wealth, v'chavod, as well as respect, honor. Ve'enenu chaser lenafsho mikol asher yisave, and there's nothing that he desires that he's lacking, right? He lacks none of his desires. But God doesn't let him eat of it, so to speak, right? God doesn't let him partake of this wealth, honor, and good fortune that he's amassed. Ki ish nochri, rather a strange person will eat it. Rather, someone else will eat from it. Zehevel v'choli rohu, right? That is futility, and it's very troubling. It's a big evil. So again, I this to me sounds more like a big misfortune rather than someone doing something that's very wrong. That's just sort of my first read on it. Questions or thoughts until now? That's the first example there, really.
It's curious you bring this up in the evil because um, I've been thinking about evil lately, and I'm wondering what actually constitutes evil. I
Sure.
mean, evil is like such a serious. My therapist was saying to me that, Hamas is evil. And, I saw the pictures of them taking when they were bringing the coffins down. And,
Yeah.
I just felt sorry for them that they're so like troubled. But
Okay.
what is actually evil? Evil is like such a serious thing,
Sure.
you know. So what I just want I'm just generally curious about what constitutes evil.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a deep question and and a hard one to answer in a straightforward way. But part of why I'm bringing it up here is because I'm not sure that these things that Shlomo is describing as evil. I'm not sure that that's how we typically think about good versus evil, right? It sounds like it's more that it's bad or misfortune. Um, you know, yeah. I mean, evil. Not sure. Evil is lack of good. Evil is bad. Evil is usually involves hurting others, hurting ourselves. That's a good when there's pain and hurt, there's a good that's like one of the indicators. That's the best I've got at the moment.
Well, the best definition I know is an evil person is someone who does something for a negligible gain without any consideration for the harm they do.
Okay.
So that is what an evil person does, is the gain to them may be of no consequence, minimal, not at all, but they have no consideration at all for what the consequences are to somebody else. But Rabbi, I think you're right. I think evil, the Ra'ah here is not that kind of evil.
Yeah.
And I think
agreed.
verse 2 says basically it points to the insecurity and the of life. You could, spend 40 years building whatever you want to name, and it could be gone literally in a second. And there's no stability. There's nothing to count on. You can't say that if I do A, I will get B. That doesn't really exist in life. We live like it does, but it doesn't really exist.
Sure. Sure. We try to navigate that way, and sometimes it works out, but at the end of the day, that's our best attempt. Yeah, that's good. I appreciate that. That also brings to mind oh, well, okay. Another thing that comes to mind, I guess, is that it sounds like Shlomo's attributing this evil to God. And I just want to take a quick aside because a lot of religions have a dualistic tendency, and we have dualistic elements within some of our thought, but God forbid we should be actual dualists, right? Our whole thing is that we're real monotheists. And one of the big mysteries of evil is, how does a holy, good God, how does a loving, benevolent God, where does evil come from if God is fully good? And I don't have a good answer, but this is coming from God, which is interesting, and I guess I'll use that as a jumping off point to say I think it's in Tehillim, right? We say in the Yotzer Or bracha that we say in the mornings before the Shema, it says Osa Shalom Uvarei Es Hakol. That's a paraphrase of an actual verse from I believe Tehillim, and I believe it is Osa Shalom. No, Osa Shalom Uvarei Es Hara, right? God who makes peace and created evil, or something along those lines, right? So there's an acknowledgement here that everything comes from God, and that just because there's evil in the world, that doesn't mean that there's like an anti-God. So that's a side point, but that's an important one. I don't think any of us made that mistake, but even so. Okay, let's keep going. Verse 3, Pasuk Gimel, Im Yolid Ish Mea V'Shanim Rabos Yichya. Right? If a person begets 100 children, the shanim rabos yichya, and lives for many years, the rav sheiyu yimei shanov, and the days of his life being long, the nafsho lo sisba min hatova, but his nefesh, his not soul really, but he doesn't get to partake. All right, his soul is not content with the good, is actually how our Art Scroll says it. V'gam kvura lo haisa lo. And even if he doesn't have a burial, omarti tov mimenu hanofel. Now this is a heavy topic, and he talks about it in ways that we wouldn't these days. But he says such a person is worse off than even a miscarried fetus, basically. A nafel is a miscarried fetus or a child, yeah, miscarried fetus. So the idea there, okay, he's going to say kiva hevel bo v'choshech yelech. Though its coming is futile and its going is in darkness, v'choshech shmo yechuse, and though its very name is enveloped in darkness, gam shemesh lo ra'a velo yada, and it didn't see the sun, nor did it know the sun, nachas lo ze mizeh, still it's better off than this other guy. V'ilu chaya. Okay, so the basic idea there, is that this person who has tasted life and has experienced life, but is unable to be satisfied with what they have in this life, they're worse off than essentially than someone who has never experienced this life, right? That's why he's using a nafel as the metaphor over here, because that's someone who, even though they've never seen the sun, but they've never had any sorrows either, right? This is someone who hasn't experienced life in any capacity, and says Shlomo, that's better than someone who experiences life and isn't able to have this certain degree of satisfaction within it. Kol amal ha'adam lefihu v'gam nefesh lo simale. No, I skipped a verse. The ilu chaya elav shanim. Right, even if you should live 1,000 years, ha'amayim, twice over. V'tova lo ra'ah, but he sees no good. He sees no contentment. Halo el makom echad hakol holech. Do we not all go to the same place? Right, in the end, everyone dies anyway. Thoughts or questions until this point?
Well, it's a very dark vision that this describes a person who, quote, has everything and has nothing. There's no satisfaction. There's no true gratification in life. It's just a very dark picture. But the other element he introduces, which is disturbing, is that, because everything ends with death, it, quote, doesn't matter. And that's even a darker, more despairing view, is basically that life, if it was nothing to some, and even if it did, that wouldn't wouldn't matter. So that's even further beyond the person who is, quote, so troubled that they get no satisfaction.
Sure.
I think there's a sense of a great equalizer of of those who have and those who don't have, and the end is still the same. So if the end is still the same, then what do you do in the meanwhile until you come to the end? And it makes a very strong case for making sure that you do what you can do it before you come to the end.
Sure.
So I mean, that's what Kohelet says to me
Sure.
in general. So,
Well, this is something that not about death, but about wealthy people unable to enjoy it. And it's not something, I don't know, it's just something I think I've observed in life. I think the reason for that is that if a person has a lot of wealth, then they start to wonder if all the friends that they have are really their friends, or they're just in it, to manipulate them, and or they can actually see through it,
Sure.
which is worse.
Sure. Sure. I think that's part of was it the previous parak, but we saw recently that a rich person's wealth won't let them sleep, right? The sleep of a laborer is good no matter how much they've eaten, but a wealthy person's riches won't let them sleep. I think that might be part of that.
I like Judy's comment a lot, that, the idea that death is a great equalizer.
Sure.
But that's also a very disturbing, challenging thought. What does that mean exactly? We all, quote, go to the same place, or maybe not, but the idea that it's a great equal, I think it's profoundly true. But like, what do you make of it? How do you integrate that, into your life? I'll tell you something, when my brother died, one person said something that very disturbed me, but I didn't think it was like wrong. She said to me, death has to happen so that we make room for other people. And it took me aback, and I never heard that said before. And this was a pretty pious woman. But then I thought, I said, in a weird way, it's true. Like the cycles of the world are, they're, made from Hashem from the beginning, right? They are made so that many things happen that have nothing to do with me or you. And the idea that we pass in order to allow new growth and new life is not a crazy idea. As I said, after I got over the shock of it, I didn't think it was a awful idea. I thought she was saying, listen, like this really is it. You know, we do pass, and what comes after us is why we pass. So make of it what you will. I thought it was an interesting thought.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and just the last thing to sort of build off of what you and Judy are saying, the big message I'm getting from these verses is that it's about quality over quantity, right? He's saying it doesn't matter how long you live, right? The death is the big equalizer. We're all gonna die. If you lived 1,000 years, if you lived, 50 years, if you lived 10 years, like that length of time, it comes for you no matter what. You can't outrun it. And so that to me emphasizes that it's more about what you're doing while you're here. Okay, let's go a little further.
I want to go back actually a little bit.
Sure,
So,
sure.
so to Parak 3, so it says, no matter how many the days of his years may come, if his gullet is not sated through his wealth. So it seems that that we have a capacity to be satisfied and and to develop that capacity. I know that's a very big issue for me generally. And so that you can have a lot of money or you can have not a lot of money, but if you feel satisfied, then it's okay. Then that there's a certain, there's a certain value to that.
Right. Me Oshir, who's the rich, Hasamech Bechelko, right? Someone
Yeah,
who's
yeah,
content with their
yeah,
lot. And I like what you're saying about capacity as well, because it is something to be nurtured and to be cultivated, because it's very easy. You're not the only one or I can say that I find myself at times wanting more, wanting more, wanting more of whatever. Food's a big answer for me, and so like it's easy to just eat and eat and eat, and to cultivate a sense of, oh, I'm full, like, oh, that was good, like I don't need the next thing. That's that takes work, and it is something to cultivate. So,
yeah, yeah.
good.
Also because I grew up with I was like, was I 10 years old or 12 years old, 11, 10, can't get no satisfaction from the
Sure.
Rolling
So,
Stones.
sure,
And
yeah.
that was, and that was like a moving, that was a very important notion that nothing is satisfying, that there, and I think that that's a way that you can look at Kohelet as well, but I think it's actually the opposite. It's really the opposite of like trying to cultivate satisfaction, a sense of
Sure.
satisfaction and knowing it.
Sure. Well, I think Koheles maybe comes to that after years of trying to find it and not getting there, and realizing that that's a big problem. If you're able to enjoy it and cultivate that enjoyment and that satisfaction, that's what makes this life much, much nicer, much better.
Yeah.
Okay, verse 7 says, Kol amal ha'adam lefihu v'gama nefesh lo simale. All of a person's toil is for their mouth, um, and yet his wants are never satisfied. Kima yoser lechacham min haksil, because why is a wise person any better than a fool? Mala oni yodea lahaloch neged achayim. What less has the pauper? What do they say? What less has the pauper who knows how to conduct himself among the living? Meaning, I guess, if you know how to live well, it shouldn't matter that you're poor. I guess. Tov mare enayin mehaloch nefesh gamze hevel urus ruach. Better is what the eyes see than what is imagined. That too is futility and a vexation of spirit. Now that's an interesting one. I'll give you my take, and then I'm curious to hear what you think. I think on the one hand, I think part of this is a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. I think there's a certain pragmatism over here that, like, what the eye actually sees, what's actually there is better than what's imagined. And I think part of what's frustrating about that is that we can imagine all kinds of wonderful things. We can imagine all, the imagination. You could think up anything. And you can be stuck waiting for that perfect vision, that beautiful vision. Meanwhile, you can't lose sight of the fact that no, what's actually there in front of you, grab onto that. That's better than getting lost in whatever you're imagining. That's why I think he calls it. That's why I think he calls it hevel or usruach, right? That it's fleeting and it's disturbing, I guess, because what you see in front of you usually is worse than the imagination. But just recognizing that no, it's actually better because it's actually there. That's tricky. That's difficult. Also want to point out that he says, "Why is a wise person any better than a fool?" That's a repeat also, I think, from the 3rd chapter where he talks about how in certain ways one's no better than the other. But then he also does admit that a wise person usually has an easier time navigating this world, at least. They find the same fate as the fool, but they do a little bit better in this world, usually. Okay, maybe let's finish the chapter and then talk a little more. So Masha Haya Kvar Nikra, right? We've seen this idea already, right? That which was already happened. Shmo Vinoda Asherhu Adam Velo Yuchal Lodin Im Shitakif Mimenu. Right? What has been was already named. Oh yeah, sorry. Kvar Nikra Shmo, right? Masha Haya, that which was Kvar Nikra Shmo, it already has a name. Vinoda Asherhu Adam, and it is known that he is but a man. He cannot contend with one who is mightier than he. Ki yesh dvarim harbe marbim havel ma yoser la'adam, because there are many things that increase futility. And how does it benefit a person? Ki mi yedea ma tov la'adam b'chayim nisparim echaye chevle v'yasim katseil. Right? Who can possibly know what's good? Right? Kimi yodea, who knows ma tov la'adam, what's good for a person b'chayim, right? What's good for a person in life? Mispar yemei chaye hevlo v'yasu ketzeil, right? His existence is quick and fleeting, and it's akin to a shadow. Asher mi yagid la'adam ma yihiyeh acharav tachas hashamash, and who can tell a person what will be after him beneath the sun? Who can say what's coming next? A little cryptic, but yeah, what do you say, folks?
I'm going to say Parak 11 translates in Sepharia, and
Yeah.
often much talks means much futility. How does it benefit a man? So,
Okay.
yeah, Devarim.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah,
Devarim
yeah.
can either mean like things, or it can literally mean words. Good.
Talk,
Good.
yeah. And that's a very important line,
Okay.
that we don't want to just be chattering.
Yeah.
That, yeah.
Yeah. The Pirkei
On
Avos
that
also
note,
has a lot
I'll
of
leave it.
sorry.
On that note, I'll leave it.
Okay. That's another one that Pirkei Avos talks about, right? I grew up among the sages, and I found that silence was the best guard for wisdom. Also there's a lot to discourage Dvarim B'Telim. Don't just chatter about meaningless stuff. Yeah, I like that translation. The ikar is the action, not the speech. Good.
I think in here he's really praising understanding. I read
Okay.
Ma Mare Einayim is it's best to see with the organ that has been created to see, your eyes. See the world through your eyes, not through your lust or your desire for fame, rich food, whatever. If you see with your eyes, you
Yeah.
can see the world as it is, and that creates understanding, which is an interesting counterpoint to everything. Is if you understand, if you see, all these things, they don't go away, but they shrink. And that's the real goal, is to see these things recede, so that I think he ultimately feels so that you can live a good life and you could experience closeness to Hashem. And that's where this is wisdom literature. And he's providing a guide. And one of the guidances I read in 9 is see with your eyes, don't see with your stomach, and don't see with your whatever. And all these other things are, yes, they'll lead you astray. They're versions of things that have no meaning at all or don't last, or whose substance is ephemeral or unknown or impossible to who knows what comes next. Yeah, exactly. So so don't climb Mount Everest, because what's that worth?
Good. I mean, and what's nice about that too is that fits with the distinction that he does draw between the wise, discerning person and the fool earlier in the book. That again, that if you have a certain understanding of this world around you, like you said, it doesn't make the issues go away, but it shrinks them a little bit. It makes them a little bit more navigable, a little bit more digestible.
I think it's uniquely human that when we understand something, we feel much better. I mean, if you understand your boss is a creep, you feel much better. Like, yeah, you have to live with the boss, but you now understand that's not you, that he is or she is a miserable person who has to make people miserable. And you really do feel better. You're like, okay, it's not me. I have to shoulder this burden. But for the last year, I've been saying, boy, am I failing? Am I a bad person? But now you figured it out. And I think that that's key. But also, my last thing I want to say is, I see more and more that going back to the very beginning, Tachat Hashemesh, I think really is a code word. It really is saying on this earth, it really is really heavy. If you're going to be here, these are the things. I think there's a lot of other things going on that matter. But I think Kohelet 3 says, okay, under the sun, this is the story. I'm not talking about anything else, because there's other things that you could contemplate. But under the sun, this is what I'm trying to communicate to you.
Good. I think that's backed up by the Chazal largely, because the Chazal do read that as a code word. They read it specifically as a code word for non-Torah matters, right? Eternality is through Torah. Tachas Hashemesh, right? That's worldly pursuits. Worldly pursuits is what he's talking about. And I think that's more or less what you're saying. I mean, you're not limiting the stuff that isn't Tachas Hashemesh to learning Torah, right? The Chazal say that the stuff that isn't Tachas Hashemesh, that's learning Torah. But what I think you're both saying is that the stuff that is Tachas Hashemesh, that's the mundane, worldly stuff. That's this life kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's sound thinking on their part. Like, if we're going to focus on this, tachlis, literally like the stuff of everyday life, this is what we're talking about. But we're only talking about that. We're not talking about all this other stuff, Torah, whatever else you want to add to things that are legitimately man's concerns.
Good. Any final thoughts or questions before we call it for this week? This Seder. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Next week we will start the 7th chapter.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Good
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.